r/AskReddit, what was something you wrongly guessed as very expensive cheap when you were a child? I thought pretty much everything was cheaper than it is. I thought houses were cheap, which they were when I was younger, but prices have gone up a lot. Houses, used to think they were like £500. Cell phones. I remember looking at phone covers in a Storm magazine, they were $20. I then realized I had $20 and got so excited to buy a new phone. I got disappointed when I realized they were just covers. Phones were so customizable and diverse back then. Gasoline and clothes, as well as food. Going out to anything other than fast food was an expensive night out. Even Applebee's. Gas, during the early 70s. All the adults were saying that it was high, then they would say that it's coming down, then back up, then it's cheap. I never could figure out a median price. College. My oldest brother and all his friends went to college, never mentioning the expense. As a kid, I thought it must be cheap because all the guys are doing it. When I was a child, I thought an average car costs like $100k. Figured credit cards meant infinite money. Turns out they do for a little bit if you're real stupid. Which I was. Didn't understand volume. Thought in-app purchases for $1 would never cost anything despite how many times it was bought. Glad my parents had a password. Video games. I am from Russia. I grew around pirated content and never had a console. I would play on PC and either download stuff from torrents or buy pirated DVDs for literal change if it wasn't on Rutracker. I remember very vividly buying CODMW and FIFA 2008 around release date for 200 rub, $3 each. I was shocked when I learned how much real games for PS3 and Xbox 360 cost. Food in the cupboard fridge. When you're young, a lot of the time it's just there. When you get older, especially when you move out, you realize how much money your parents spent to keep you fed. Pants. Anyone who has ever shopped for pants knows they cost almost triple what a t-shirt costs, double what shorts cost, and the same or slightly less than jackets, hoodies, jumpers. They are a lot more expensive than what you think they are as a child. I always thought Veneta ice cream was so posh and expensive. The cost of building a fort that connected my backyard to my friend's backyard still hasn't happened. Fast food. It's very expensive when you're feeding 5. The dentist. Didn't think I'd be dead from getting teeth fixed. Well, my younger brother used to think everything cost $99 for some reason, so I guess anything that cost an amount other than $99. Although buying cards was expensive. My first purchase was a $1 UGR card and I thought it was the most expensive thing in the world. Why would this piece of cardboard be $1? Now I am 3 years deep in Magic with a $250 minus $300 deck, and have spent about $40 on maybe 24 cards in the past month. Food coloring and fondant icing for baking. Thought it was so expensive and that's why only fancy cakes used them. Turns out they cost like £1 each. Every Hot Wheels Matchbox car. I had one car from the 70s and my mom told me that car is worth a lot of money, and I thought all of my cars were worth the same amount. I had around 100 cars. Cars for sure. When I was young I figured just about everyone made something like $75k a year salary, so all that money could be spent on a car and would only take 1 year to pay for a real nice car. Partly because of inflation since the 90s, and partly because I lived in a cheap area, I remember thinking that a house over $100k was only for the rich people. Now, where I live, you literally cannot buy a single wide trailer for $100k. Always thought clothing was cheap. Wasn't until I was in college that I realized I always had new clothing because my mom never bought anything for herself for like 15 years. Disney movies. I grew up poor and my dad would always get the forgettable off-brand versions of popular cartoon movies. Instead of The Hunchback of Notre Dame, for example, I get to see The Secret of the Hunchback. Lots and lots of that. When I saw a kid who owned a real Disney movie on VHS, I assumed they were very rich. I didn't realize you could buy several in 1 month and not have to declare bankruptcy even without being rich. Cocaine. I thought it was something you had to be a huge celebrity or millionaire to afford. Then I went to college. I have kind of a funny story that is related. I got an allowance even when I was really young, but it was only a few dollars a week. When I was probably 6 or 7, we were at the mall and I saw a sign for golden retriever puppies for $2.99. Naturally I assumed this was $2.99. I went into the store and proudly put $3 on the counter only to be told I would need a lot more than that. As an adult I also look back and I can't imagine what my parents would have done if I had somehow had enough to purchase a dog despite the fact that we already had to at the time. Food. I used to be like, Dad, can we have steak, but now Ma just wants ramen. Good thing my dream is to become a chef. The cinema. We never went. Expensive, cheap is all relative I guess. But anytime I visited a friend's house when I was in like late elementary school, late 1990s, and they had any of the following items, I automatically assumed they were loaded. Pool table, air hockey table, etc. Swimming pool, humongous television, more than one brand of game console, a large collection of movies, large as in, say, 100 plus. Time. I thought I'd have forever to do the things I want and just procrastinated. Too many missed opportunities. It never occurred to me that some food was more expensive than other food. I 100% thought my mom made spaghetti all the time because it was her favorite. I was much older when I realized it was because it would feed a lot of people very cheap. Medical care. My parents both had government jobs with good insurance, so they didn't even have to pay co-pays. Legos. Those things are expensive. Disneyland. Honestly, I didn't really have a guess on how much a ticket was, but we got to go every couple of years, so I figured it was no big deal. Video games were crazy expensive, but that's the only thing I cared about. So when I looked at X item, I would compare it to video game prices, 40 minus 60 US dollars. In other words, I would look at something and think that costs like half a video game. With that amount I could get 3 video games, that's like a quarter of a video game. I kept doing this until I reached 17. Rugs. Why are rugs so fucking expensive? Curtains. Never thought of them being valuable. Guess what? If you have someone make them fit your place, they cost a fortune. Meat for expensive and veggies for cheap. As a kid it's all food and you think they are in the same magnitude, but I was surprised to see how big the difference in price is. Concrete statues. Our neighbors had 2 lions at the end of their driveway, in a very modest neighborhood, and I thought they must be the richest people in the world. Those self-stick bows you put on gifts. I used to think they were super expensive because everyone in my family used them over and over. We had a few that we used so much, they were recognizable. We had a few fancy ones. Wrapping paper too. Based on how careful my family was about not tearing it and how my grandmother would fold it, I figured it must be really expensive. Yeah, both are super cheap. Lego bricks. When I was a kid I remember having hundreds of them, but now a box of like 100 pieces is over $15. My mom used to buy a lot of fancy looking drinking glasses and I always tried my best to treat them with care. I broke one of them one time and started to freak out, thinking that my mom would be paid. She came in and saw the broken glass and I started profusely apologizing. She laughed and told me that she wasn't mad over a cheap $1 glass from Dollar Tree. I was shook. I thought wheat bread was way more expensive than white. My siblings and I would always ask for wheat bread, and it was my mom's favorite as well, but we almost never got it. Turns out, my dad only likes white bread. It wasn't a price thing, it was just selfishness. I don't remember any off the top of my head, but my sister used to think that ATMs were free money, and b, you spend like $10 on a credit card and then you have as much as you want on it. Trading cards. My mom used to make a huge deal about buying them for me, stating that they costed a fortune. Later came to realize that $5 a pack really isn't that much. I usually was allowed to get a pack or two a month, and the sweaty adults I used to play at tournaments had spent hundreds or even thousands. I stood on our toilet seat and broke it when I was around 10. I was so upset thinking that it was the biggest mistake of my life and would cost my parents so much money. I replaced my toilet seat last week and it cost me $6. Cruise ships. Everyone else's parents seemed to fly them everywhere and catch a cruise, and everyone would always take a vacation somewhere that sounded exotic. I always thought, it's just a boat, you're trapped traveling really slow to your destination. How much could it be? Going out to eat. I think I thought it cost like $10.20 or something. I never understood why we didn't go to more restaurants when I was a kid. Thought my mom was just cheap. Turns out feeding a family of 5 at mediocre restaurant can easily cost over $100 if people get drinks, appetizers, and dessert. Always had sparkling grape juice as kids, but only for New Year's. Seemed like such a lavish bottle. They're cheap as H, but only having it that often made it feel so special. PCs. Turns out that a case equals a PC. I remember wanting to have the cheapest beverage at a theme park with my aunt and uncle when I was 11. I insisted on having water, while they were subtly nudging me towards milk. Milk was cheaper, who knew? Me, as a teacher. I thought when I became a teacher, I was looking at $30K a year. I make way more than that, and I'm just getting started. N64 games in 2020. That system is like 20 years old. Why is GoldenEye still $60? Furniture. When I went to look for a sofa for the first time ever, I was thinking how much could a couch possibly cost? $100, maybe $500 for a really nice one. Maybe $1,000 or something for the really big ones with electric recliners and consoles. Oh boy, was I in for a shock. Ended up finding a glorious old lady couch at a Goodwill for $150. We put the pieces, 3 total, one at a time, on top of a sedan and got friends to reach out the windows and hold the foot pegs to transport it. When writing compositions in primary school, I'd give my characters a $5 fine for jaywalking. Paper towels. My mother was so stingy with the things it was pointless to even have them in the house. A family of 4 kids and we'd go through a roll a month. Well, when I was very young I used to think things' value cost was determined by how many $1 bills could fit into it. As in, to buy a car, stuff it with ones and then that's how much you owe the seller. Bananas. Thought they were like $10. My middle school age son organized his first trip with 3 of his friends to the movies without parents. I bought the tickets beforehand and gave him $40 for snacks and drinks. After dropping him off, I took my youngest to the arcade across from the theater, and while we were there caught a glimpse of my son walking into the theater with his friends, all of them holding large slushies. My son had a definite holy yes look on his face. When I picked him up a few hours later, he said to me, I offered to buy my friend slushies and told the guy medium, but then he handed us these big ass drinks and said it was $38. Now ever since, he's been asking me things like, do I have any bonds? How much does radio DJ, animator, doctor make? How do I get a trust fund? Lol, sorry kid, I just had a little extra from working overtime. healthcare and going to the doctors and all of that. My parents had amazing healthcare and I never thought that it was insurance that paid for everything. I thought it was free for everyone because, well, why wouldn't it be? Healing and helping people I thought was going to be super cheap and free. Yeah, now I know other side. Lego building sets. Loved them when I was little and still do, however I now see how much they are. Cheese. I shudder to think of the money that went down my neck in cheese when I was a boy.